Nicole, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to talk to you about why you chose this career path of being a photographer and all the wonderful things that come with it. So maybe we'll just start there. Tell us, how did you choose this career path? Did you wake up one morning and said, I want to be a photographer and everything else connected? How did you do that?
No way. It actually kind of chose me in a way. I've always been a creative artist and decided to go to college for something completely different. I didn't decide to jump aboard of this career path right away. So I was an occupational therapist and I was working with special needs kids and I was going to school for that. And there's something to be said when you're going to school for one thing and still taking classes for photography or for art classes. And I decided to take some time off and figure out what I want to do. And so I, from there, got a great opportunity from a neighbor across the street. She got me to shoot a couple assignments, editorial assignments for a magazine and for a newspaper. And it was definitely a man's world. And I loved it. It was great. It was exciting. And I did some great pieces for them and kind of went from there. So, yeah, it definitely chose me. And I'm so grateful for it.
Well, excellent. Now, how did you gain credibility, even though this was not the field that you originally chose? How did you do that?
Credibility is so important, especially with business, and something that you love to do, making it into a business. And I actually worked with a lot of really great photographers. I interned with them, and from there I got to know the business part of it, and then and went to school full-time, got a degree, and then I started working and networking with other people and started doing stuff that I love and shooting different assignments, and then from there I just built relationships. So credibility comes from really good relationships, from even it's just a small little client to a very large one. And yeah, so that's credibility. That's where I basically got it from.
Mm-hmm. Well, excellent.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember your first official client of your business when you got your business name done and everything ready? Said, I'm going into business. Do you remember your first client, and if so, how did that come about?
I started my business, and I started it part-time first, which most people, when they're deciding to jump ship from what they're normally doing to earn a living and move forward, they start it slowly. And so that's what I did. I did it part-time, and I was working full-time. And so I had a friend of mine who referred me to someone else and said, hey, I have someone who is getting married, looking for a photographer. I love your work. I know you're not a wedding photographer per se. You've done a lot of events, but I really think you'd work well with them. And because she knew me so well, and she vouched for me. And so I met the couple. I did engagement photos for them. I ended up doing a large wedding in San Diego. It was one of the hottest days of the year. Isn't that always the way?
Absolutely.
And I truly feel that I got that job because she knew who I was as a person. She knew I was reliable. The credibility part definitely played into that role. And I learned from there that I was a really good photographer. I knew that. I knew I had a lot to learn if I was going to make it a full-time job. But from that point on, I knew, hey, if I'm going to move forward with my business, I need a network. I need to talk to people. I need to teach people what I do. And it was a valuable lesson. So that's kind of where I started. So where Nicole Leone photography started.
So now you talk about networking. People are always interested in that because you invited to all these things to network, these clubs, these things like that. So how did you build your network? How did you do that?
Well, to kind of back up a little bit, I learned from that with networking that it was really important just from that one job. And then going on your own with your own business is really scary. Like, where do you get your work from? How am I going to eat next month is basically your main goal.
Amen.
And I was really lucky along the way to learn to network a couple of different ways. One was when I interned for a couple of photographers, which anyone should definitely do, intern in your industry. It's so important. And I got to watch other professional photographers network. How did they get their business? Who did they work with? How did they, talk to other clients? How did friends become clients? So that was a great way to learn just the business part of it, and also the networking part, which was really important. And then I had actually worked for an agent who was a rep for photographers. And I watched her network, and she did everything over the phone. So this was a totally two ends of the spectrum. And her job was to get jobs for photographers. And she worked that phone like a salesperson like I've never seen. Mm-hmm. But what a great opportunity to watch that part of it and to learn what was current in the market. What were the phrases to say over the phone? Even if someone said, no, you can't speak to this person at Target, how do you work your way around it to find the right and correct person to do that? And then to network with them and create a relationship that you had that was ongoing. So I got to learn that part of it. And then the third part, when I finally went on my own full time, I had another photographer friend who said, you need to join a networking group. You need to learn how to network, how to be a business person. Everyone needs to learn this. And I said, well, where do I go? And she said, well, I belong to one, and I went and found one in my area, same company, and I learned through classes how to network better, how to teach how my message to come across correctly, how to teach the people around me to sell for me in a way, to be my sales force. So it's smart networking. And I think a lot of people don't realize how important that piece of it is. Yeah, it's important to make sure your books are correct and to make sure you're, especially photographers. I want to be a photographer. I don't want to be a business person. I hate to break it to you. You're a business person. Right. And it's okay to delegate that part to someone else too. But when you first start off, you don't always have the capital to do that. And people want to know who they're working with. So I've learned so much from all three sections of that as my business grew and as I grew as a business person. And I'm still learning, but I must say the best part about networking is that I get most of my business from one-on-one conversation. Technology's great. Everyone sees your stuff. You can network that way. Great. But that's one little foot in the door. Maybe that's a start of a conversation. But if you want an ongoing relationship with your clients, I have some clients I've had for 7 years, 8 years. And all they do is call me and they say, you know what you're doing, here's what we need to do. Can't wait for you to give me my proposal. And they never bother me when it comes to money. They never want to negotiate. They know my value. They know what I bring. And it all started with a conversation. So it's really important that everyone's heads down on their phone, in some other world. You need to pull yourself back and start having one-to-one conversations, even over a glass of wine. Or a beer at the bar. It's amazing. You do find really good clients that way, and that's the best way to network. But be smart about networking. Find out what other people in the industry are doing and what they're not doing, and that can kind of set you apart. But yeah.
Very good. Very sage advice. No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, because people always wondering where, like you said, where's my business coming from? Mm-hmm. And you just have to get out there. You really have to come from building relationships.
Yeah.
So that's good advice. We appreciate that. Now, what would you say, besides the networking, was the other smartest thing you did when you first were ramping up your business? I
think the smartest part wasn't always in the beginning. I didn't always make smart decisions in the beginning, like all of us. But I think the smartest thing I can ever do for my own business is say no. A lot of us women have a hard time saying no.
Now, why do you say that?
Because sometimes, especially for artists, people try to dictate what your value is, what your worth is. Don't ever underestimate what you are and how much you're worth. We create stuff from nothing. It takes time, and it takes time. And yeah, we come in and we photograph, but there's also other things we do afterwards that are really important. We don't just go in and take pictures of your stuff and say, here you go. For my company, we come in more of a marketing standpoint, and we want to know, where's your business going in 5 years? What are you doing? Who's your target market? And so if a company comes to us and says, we want to bid for this, and we give it to them, and it's a fair bid, there's always negotiation room. We all know that.
Right, of course.
But if, for example, I had a potential client who came to me and they asked for a bid, and I gave them a bid for the job, and they came back saying, it's a little out of our price range. We were looking more for this amount of money. And it was way low. And I knew what my bottom line would have been. I knew it was below that. So instead of saying no right away, I said, well, I understand that this is the financial area that you're in. For this amount of money, our company can do this for you. And then we can grow with you. So if we can do this now, maybe in a couple of months, we'll get this amount of money allocated to do the next step. So I was trying to create a plan for them instead of just saying, you're done, we're never going to do this. Well, they were a little offended by that. And they were like, well, it's just a couple images. And I said, I understand that, but this is what it's worth. So they went with a different photographer, which is fine. I stuck to my guns and said, we're not doing this for this price. It's actually unfair to my team. So they went with a different photographer. They came back within a month and they said, do you remember us? And we all remember those.
Exactly.
And I said, yes. And they said, well, we don't like anything the photographer did. And, for other business owners, you have to understand, you pay for what you get. If there's a bag online that's $2.99 and that same bag, there's a different bag online for, $30. There's a difference between those bags. One bag you can't chuck off, a cliff and it's not going to rip,
Right.
And the other bag it's going to. So, they kind of came back and were disappointed in what the photographer did. And I said, well, this is what our price is. This is what you're going to get. This is the value you're going to get out of it. And they were really happy in what they did. But in the long run, they ended up spending more money than they needed to. And it was a hard lesson for them to learn. But saying no and knowing where our limits were was really important.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice, not devaluing it, especially when, like you say, you're an artist.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just snapping a couple of shots, and it's going back and doing retouch and Photoshop and all those wonderful things.
Yes, and sometimes coming up with the concepts and ideas and executing all of that.
Yeah, you become a creative director and all of those things.